I started today's show by saying that last week, in fact, I think it was last Thursday or Friday, on a very, very good, it's about the only empirical evidence you'll get, the New Zealand Qualifications Authority and the New Zealand Ministry of Education published on Education Counts the NCEA results for all the schools in New Zealand. Now, so it's all the secondary schools in New Zealand. They do it every year about this time. God knows why it takes until August. We'll be talking to Elwyn Poole later on, our education consultant, about that later on this week. I don't know why it takes so long. It seems an inordinate period of time to do it. And as a result of what they do is they drop off. It's 3 years of reporting. So on Friday, up went the 2023 results, NCEA results for every school in New Zealand for levels 1, 2 and 3. And then, as I said to you, they dropped off the previous, or 3 years ago. So it would have been 2020 to 2022, and now it's 2021 to 2023. Okay, so they put up the last 3 years. Now, those are quite important, in fact, those results, because they tell you how your school, or your son or daughter or granddaughter or grandson is going. And in a place where Dunedin would be a really good example, Wellington would be another, Hawke's Bay would be another, Palmerston North, and a number of larger areas of this country. That's quite important information as to whether or not you are going to send your son or daughter to your school. It's probably the most important decision that a parent will make, and that is, if you have the choice, choosing which school, secondary school or primary school, but particularly secondary school, to send your child. All right, so it's a big deal, that particular choice. In lots of places in this country, though, I have to say, no such choice exists. So I'll give you an example. You might have ended up in an appalling position where there are zonings, which means that you have to send your child to a particular school, local school. You're not allowed to send them out. Or alternatively, the schools that are out of your zone are all zoned only for people who live in them. So even if you wanted to send your child, for example, to Auckland Grammar or Epsom Girls Grammar, say in Auckland, you couldn't because you don't live in the zone. And schools are getting very toey about that, I might add too. Well, no, the Ministry of Education is getting very toey about that. Don't ask me. I mean, I hate zoning. I loathe the idea that you can't send your children to the school of your choice. And I think that New Zealand's educational qualities would greatly increase if there was more freedom, because it would mean that bad schools that people have lost confidence in and are not meeting the needs of their children or of their parents would lose roles, and that would be instantly exposed by the number of people who went there. That would lead to questions, obviously. Ditto, it would mean that schools probably like Auckland Grammar, that if, as an example, I think it's got about 2,000 students or 2,200 students now, they'd probably double or triple their size. And although they might not want to, and that's fair enough, they might actually get some input from the Ministry of Education to say, well, what are you doing so well at your school that people want to go there and not say, I don't know, Papakura High School or something like that. I'm just using it as an example. But no, so they zone it, and that denies that choice, which means you've got to be rich, to send your child to Auckland Grammar. But it's a public high school. You shouldn't have to be rich, and why shouldn't anybody who lives in the proximate area be able to send their son to that school? So, there's serious equity issues that arise from that. In other parts of the country, though, mine's one of them in actual fact, where I live, particularly in rural and provincial and sort of smaller provincial areas, there's no choice anyhow. There's one school. And at that stage, again, if the school's not very good or deemed not to be very good, then yes, the richer folk have choices. So you can choose to send your son or daughter to boarding school, which seems, when you think about it, quite an extreme choice. I've got to not see my son or daughter for 40 weeks of the year because of the quality of education of my local school. Alternatively, you can just say, well, I'm going to grin and bear it, and I'll send them to that school. And if you've got a good school and it's doing well and it's meeting the needs of its community, no problem. But in many cases, and if you remember about this time last year, I was getting roundly criticised for suggesting that Tokomairiro High School, for example, which was a school that's it's a place called Milton. And Milton, perhaps best known now as the site of the new Otago Regional Prison. I would imagine that a good part of Milton's economy now is built around the medium security prison as it is now, that lies just down the road. Anyhow, and I was saying, gosh, Tokomairiro High School, gosh, that's got a dreadful rating last year. And rightly, people would ring up and said, I like Tokomairiro High School and they're doing a great job and it's not their fault. Well, I ended up last week, because I live in, as you know, I live in a place called Cromwell, which is, it's a funny little place. No, I'll rephrase it. Yes, it is strange, actually. And not strange bad, just strange. It lies in between Cromwell. The two sort of golden tourist towns of this country. Oh, there are three actually if you put Taupo in there. But the two golden tourist towns of this country are Queenstown, which is probably the international tourist town, and then Wanaka. And almost equidistant between Queenstown and Wanaka is a small town, or used to be a very small town, called Cromwell. And it was of no great consequence, Cromwell, except during the late 1980s, early 1990s, the Clyde Dam was built just down the road from Cromwell, the Clyde Dam. And the workforce required for the Clyde Dam moved from the Tekapo Pukaki area, and it moved to construct the Clyde Dam. And Cromwell, is probably being the closest residence, became a new Ministry of Works dam town, very much like Twizel. Twizel was made from scratch. Cromwell had always been there. It used to be called the Junction, because the other part of Cromwell that's interesting is that it is at the junction of two rivers. The Karo, which is a river that comes out of Lake Wakatipu, and the Clutha, which is the river that comes out of Lake Wanaka. And they both meet and they join their waters at Cromwell. It used to be called the Junction for that reason. But now suddenly they were going to make a dam there, and population of Cromwell grew like topsy. Once the dam was built, the whole place left. So the population depopulated almost instantly because there was no work there anymore, and Cromwell became a small, inoffensive but flooded town. And you'll remember rightly, for those of a certain memory, there was a huge political scrap at the time involving the then Social Credit Party and its leader Bruce Beetham as to whether or not they were going to support legislation by then Sir Robert David Muldoon, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the leader of the National Party, which would allow the Clyde Dam to be built. And one of the consequences of the Clyde Dam being built is that the old Cromwell town that had been built on the junction of those rivers was flooded. And they built a new town, or a new city centre, away from obviously where that flooding was. You can still see the ruins of some of the old flooded buildings on the banks of the Clutha River, what they now call Old Cromwell. All right, that's fine. We moved here. I moved here in 2016 to Cromwell, so that's how long we've been resident here. And obviously there were three schools, two primary schools and a secondary school. Now the really interesting thing is that even though there were only two primary schools, the Ministry of Education had deemed them to be zoned. I know it makes no sense, does it? You got 2 primary schools, but where you live determines, and they were strictly enforced, very strictly enforced, those zones, and believe it or not, they still are to this day, which obviously is a talking point amongst locals because they think that that's wrong, and I think they're right. Anyhow, it also has a local high school, and it's called a college. As you know, colleges in New Zealand are usually designated a college and not a high school because they take years 7 to 13. So they have, if you like, those 2 intermediate years attached at the start of the school. And there are a number of schools like that in New Zealand as well. They were going to be the model for a wee while there under the former Minister of Education, Trevor Mallard. He was moving that way. So there was a move to abolish all the intermediates in New Zealand and either let primary schools, what they call recapitate, add a couple of years onto them, so they'd be year 1 to 8, or alternatively do what has happened in Cromwell. You put your 7 and your 8s to year 7s and your 8s at your secondary school. And nothing particularly remarkable about that. Number of schools like that in New Zealand. So so when Education Counts published the latest NCEA results for Cromwell College, I think it was last Thursday or Friday, I was interested. And the reason I was interested and alerted to this was, obviously it's my local school, but the second reason was because I'd seen at the start of the year the school boasting, and fair enough, I mean, every school should feel proud about itself, boasting about its NCEA results and saying how good they'd been in comparison to the New Zealand average. And they were boasting for a reason. They were highlighting the fact they'd done really well with their NCEA results because they were telling you, hey, we're a good school. And we're the sort of school that, frankly, you'd want to send your kids to, and forget about sending them away to boarding school. You've got a brilliant school just on your doorstep. And gosh, and if you had NCEA results that were better than the national average, why wouldn't you boast about it? Why wouldn't you be proud about that? Why wouldn't you tell your local community what a fantastic school and great teachers and great quality of education that we offer? And I had no problems with that at all. And I thought, oh, good on them. Then I looked, obviously, last Thursday and thought, oh, how much better? It was because I remembered that. They had advertised it quite extensively in February or March of this year. And I thought, oh, I wonder how much better they were than the national average. So, yes, Michael Trainspotter goes to the Cromwell College site on the Education Counts website, scrolls down to the school qualifications section and reads NCEA Level 1. And I read NCEA Level 1 and I went, oh, yeah, they're just a bit better than the national average. Oh, no, they're not. No, they're about, oh, yes, they are. So I looked and I thought they were just a bit better. And then I looked at their Level 2, that's NCEA Level 2, and Level 3 results and went, whoa, wait on. They're much worse than the national average. And then I started to compare all the other schools in the Central Lakes area. We've got 4 Dunstan High Schools in Alexandra, Wakatipus in Queenstown, Mount Aspiring Colleges in Wanaka. And I thought, well, I wonder how the school goes against those, and discovered that it wasn't going very well at all. And so I simply published the data of NCEA's Level 1, 2 and 3 for Cromwell College, compared them to the 3 local schools in the district and with the New Zealand average, and just left it alone. Well, poof, can I say. It all took off. And the school got so defensive that over the weekend that it's just gone, sent a text message to all of its students declaiming the fact that these statistics were out here, saying that they were wrong and saying how well they'd actually done. And I thought, well, they can't both be right. The school on the one hand can't be saying that it's got much better school qualifications results than Education Counts, which is saying it's doing really badly, particularly in comparison to other schools in the areas, but even in comparison to the national average. I was going, that can't be right. You can't, they can't, both those two things can't be true. So yesterday I contacted Elwyn Poole, who, as you know, we regularly interview as one of New Zealand's outstanding education commentators, and I said, I must have got something wrong. I've clearly offended the local school. I didn't mean to, but I was just simply pointing out the fact. Have I got this wrong? To which, of course, Elwyn writes back and says, no, you've got it absolutely right. It's the school's problem, and what they're trying to do is essentially, I didn't say this, but essentially he was arguing is that they're doctoring their statistics so that they can appear better than they are. And I thought, how interesting. And that's the scrap I got involved in. Because here's the question. I suspect, just between you and me, that confronted with the facts and a national testing regime that is common throughout New Zealand, a whole series of boards of trustees in this country are discovering, like I did, that those statistics are completely different than the statistics that their own senior teachers are giving them around the Board of Trustees tables. And the reason why that's important is because here we have given an awful lot of control and decision-making to boards of trustees around this country who are ultimately reliant upon only one person to provide them, and that's their school principal, with the correct information, unless that can be independently verified as by going to the education website, Count's website. And at which point you ask the obvious question, if Board of Trustees aren't getting the correct information and are being given the wrong information, then how can they make value judgments about who they employ at their school or the kind of policy decisions that they might make at that school? And then that is a question that is current throughout the entire country. I would imagine, like last week, there are a number of school principals who, when that information was published on the Education Counts website, had an awful lot of explaining to do. Some, like Cromwell College, just said, no, these are the wrong statistics. Others said, oh, well, they're extenuating circumstances. And others probably hoped like hell that the Education Counts website crashed repeatedly because they didn't want either the parents, the Board of Trustees, or the local community knowing. One of those was yours. Your thoughts?